I went to school in Hoopeston, Illinois. My parents moved to Illinois when I was probably, I'm thinking maybe 3-4 years old. They moved to Illinois, so I actually grew up in Hoopeston, Illinois, which is 100 miles directly south of Chicago, Illinois, and only 25 miles north of Danville, Illinois. John Deere owned a plant in Hoopeston, Illinois, and my husband was a supervisor for John Deere. And the EPA closed the plant down. So we ended up moving to Blytheville, Arkansas. My husband accepted a job in Blytheville. And we got a call from John Deere in Waterloo saying, Ralph, would you be interested in moving to Waterloo, Iowa? And of course, Ralph accepted the job, but he didn't tell me until I got a call saying, when is Ralph going to show up in Waterloo? And that's when I found out that we were moving to Waterloo. So we have one son, and we moved to Waterloo, and I was offered a job with the city collecting parking tickets. And I thought, I don't want to do that. It's not something I'm really interested in. And then the Blackhawk County Youth Shelter needed someone to actually get their books in order. So I went to work for the Blackhawk County Youth Shelter, and then ended up at one time being a co-chair of the youth shelter. Then was offered a job working for AEA 7 at that time as the administrative assistant for the Division of Educational Services. And then from there got recruited to the Greyhound Park, where I worked at the Greyhound Park as their bookkeeper and also as special events. And it was during that time that I decided I was going to attend the University of Northern Iowa. So I actually attended for probably about a couple years and was offered a job with the Main Street program in downtown Cedar Falls. At that time, that was back in the early 90s. They were part of the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and it was really kind of interesting because they were ready to close down the program because it wasn't achieving what they had hoped it would achieve. So I was hired as the executive director. I told them I'd give them 2 years, and within 6 months, the state came in and said we were poised for success. And then I got recruited to Cedar Falls Utilities. And it was during that time that I was asked to run for the Board of Supervisors. I received a call from one of the members of the Board of Supervisors asking me if I would consider running for the Board of Supervisors. So I sat down with the chair of the Blackhawk County Republicans at that time, with a couple gentlemen that also wanted to run for the Board of Supervisors. And during that meeting, which I think this is very important, especially when I look at what's going on today, and I look at the 19th Amendment, which I am so committed to. I found it really, what happened to me just sends a strong message. In that interview, I looked at the two guys and I said, let's really figure out who can actually win this. And then let's get behind that person, whether it's me or whether it's one of you. Let's get behind and support them. I got a call from the chair telling me I was too strong of a female for the Republican Party. So it was kind of a slap. I let it go because I really didn't want to run anyway, and it wasn't something that the Cedar Falls Utilities was going to support. So I just kind of walked away from it and didn't think anything about it. And then one day I was at the Y working out, and one of the representatives from this district said, Doris, would you really consider running for the Iowa House? And I said, well, I don't know. That was after I'd lost my husband of several years to lung cancer, and actually didn't know what I was going to do. No family in Iowa. Am I going to stay here or am I going to leave? What am I going to do? And at that time, I was working for Black & Veatch out of Kansas City. I got recruited from the Cedar Falls Utilities by Vectren and then Black & Veatch out of Kansas City.
What is Black & Veatch?
Black & Veatch is a global leading engineering company. And so I traveled the country working with Black & Veatch on feasibility studies for those cities that were interested in forming their own telecommunications utility. And so I decided, well, maybe I'll consider this. And he said, but you're going to have to switch parties, because I was a registered Republican. You're going to have to switch parties, Doris. And I thought, well, the Republican Party doesn't, I'm too strong for them, so might as well. So that's when I decided to switch parties, and that was in 2006. Having worked for a city, at one time I had a pretty good feel of politics, but I have to say that I enjoyed meeting the people. And the thing that was so important to me when I ran, it wasn't just that I really didn't have family here. One thing that really bothered me when I lost my husband, it was while Ralph was going through 2 years of lung cancer. It was the cost, and being John Deere, of course, prescription drugs were paid for, but one prescription, the cost was just unreal. And I thought to myself, growing up in a family that didn't have a whole lot, I thought to myself, how can people actually afford this? This is absolutely crazy. Here I am, I don't have to worry about it, but it's not fair. It's not fair to those people out there that, it was up in the thousands of dollars. And I thought, this is absolutely crazy. So I was really committed to trying to make a change, but it's hard to make a change. I was part of a group that believed in working across the aisle and representing my community. That was important to me, representing my constituents. I even had an advisory group that I would meet with. And I had, on that advisory group, I had independents, Republicans from every precinct, Republicans, independent, and Democrats, because I really represented all. I didn't represent just the Democratic Party. And I would, when there was a tough bill, we'd meet at the Cedar Falls Library, and I'd say, okay, here's the bill. How do you want me to vote? And we would actually vote. They would tell me what they wanted, and I would follow their recommendation. Starting out, the Speaker of the House really, I think, wanted me to be more of a leader. And I actually floor managed quite a few bills, some that were pretty important. The one bill that I remember floor managing was one that gave cities the right to work together. For instance, you'll recall where Cedar Falls wanted to annex in some property from Hudson, and it was very controversial. Well, I passed some legislation that allowed those two cities to work together and share taxes. So, and anything that had to do with utilities, was always, Doris, would you floor manage these bills? And I would floor manage those bills. And I do recall a representative that actually worked for Mid-American standing up and say, now, Representative Kelley, does this do exactly what you say it does or will do? And I said, yes, sir. Yes, it does. Representative Watt, it'll do exactly what I told you it would do. So I did have the support from the other side. Mary Ray asked me to attend a League of Women Voters of Iowa meeting, and I attended that meeting. And after I left the meeting, I got a call saying, hey, Doris, you're now on the board. And I thought, I didn't even say anything about being interested in being on this board. Then it was probably the next meeting, Mary Ray comes up to me and says, Doris, I really want you to chair the 19th Amendment Centennial Commemoration. And I thought to myself, well, I've managed to get through 2 terms in the Iowa House. I managed to be vice chair and chair of the Iowa Board of Parole, taking that to totally electronic. So this will be a walk in the park. That's not going to be a problem at all. But at that time, I didn't realize how much money I was going to have to raise to really make this a statewide project. But I knew from the very beginning, if we were going to do it, and it was going to be statewide, that it had to be a collaboration. It could not just be the League of Women Voters, that we had to pull other groups in. So we held our very first meeting in June of 2017, and it was held at the Carrie Cat Center. And there were 8 different organizations, representatives from 8 different organizations that attended that meeting. And it was at that meeting that it was decided that the League of Women Voters would take the lead, and that it would be called the 19th Amendment Centennial Commemoration, not celebration, but commemoration. The theme that we came up with is hard won, not done. And the reason for the hard won is the amount of years it took for women to actually gain the right to vote. They started that process in 1847, and it wasn't approved until 1920. It wasn't until 1920 that they actually took male out of the Constitution. But we only talk about 73 years. I like for people to understand that the first presidential election was held in 1789. I think it was 1789. So we're looking at 131 years before women got the right to vote. We definitely need to educate them on the hard-won part. My focus is on the not done. And that may surprise you, because as I look at what's going on now, definitely getting them to the point where they understand the hard-won. And the reason for that, trying to educate them, is because Steve Corbin, my husband, was at a meeting, and a professor from UNI said, "What is Doris doing these days?" And Steve said, "Well, she's chairing the 19th Amendment Centennial Commemoration." Well, what's the 19th Amendment? And this gentleman's in his 60s. And just being in meetings, and I've made a point of asking a lot of young ladies, even ladies that are in their 50s, and asking them, "Do you know what the 19th Amendment was about?" No, not really. We need to educate them, and this is the opportunity we have with the commemoration coming up, the 100 years. It's an opportunity that we cannot let go. But I want to focus on the not done, and here's why. With gerrymandering, voter suppression, women still fighting for equality. We're not the first generation to feel the sting of politics, but we may be the last one that can do something about it. And I really want the generations that are following me to understand that and to have the tenacity to push to make sure that we do have equal. You educate them. You have to educate them. And I can give you some examples. One of our projects, curriculum. It meets the core standards. And it is already online on our webpage. That was one thing, peer reviewed. We do, and it will be available for all of the high schools in the state of Iowa, public and private curriculum. That was important. I talked about having to raise the $400,000. Part of that money will be used to promote this. As a matter of fact, most of it will be used to promote. You have to let people know. You have to get the message out. There's also, and going back to your question, educating them, letting them know what is going on. But giving you just an example from my own perspective, I remember saying to my mother, who passed away 2 years ago, that my sister, who lived at home and has always lived at home, who just recently passed away in August, I remember saying to my mother, "My sister really needs a will, Mother." So what did my mother do? Ask my brother whether she needed a will or not. It's not that far behind us. It isn't. And then when my sister passed away, my brother takes over. And totally left out. It's only the man. I experienced that with my generation. I'm still experiencing it. And if I'm still experiencing it, it's not that far behind us. It really isn't. So we're still in it, in this generation. But the thing is to educate the next generation and let them know, and hopefully they will understand. It's just really crazy. It really is, because now how many women are out there as the breadwinners? How many families where both of them are working? It's equal now. But yet it isn't equal. It needs to be equal.